Thank you, Charles. Apsáalooke, Naniha Nolan Brown, and Fort Hall, Nineteenth. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you. It seems pretty intimidating with all of the strong minds and the smart people here in this room, but I'm happy to be here and share what knowledge that I have and to share some of the perspectives of my tribe, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. I prepared a PowerPoint with a few photographs. All right, so my tribe, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, are located on the Fort Hall Reservation in southeastern Idaho. This photograph here is a picture of some of the buffalo in the National Wildlife, the National Elk Refuge there near Grand Teton National Park. And our tribe goes there annually on a ceremonial buffalo hunt. So of course, Language and Culture Preservation Department is where I work at, and the Original Territories Historic Research Office, and here's some contact information in case you guys are interested in contacting us. Our tribe, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, are a combination of many different bands that ranged from all of these areas. This image is appearing pretty small on these TVs, but what it shows is the Shoshone treaties or agreements that our different bands had entered into. And you can see it ranges from Wyoming all the way to Oregon near the Klamath Reservation. And then from the south, one of the earliest treaties in 1855 is there in Utah. And then of course the different treaties and agreements in Idaho are all here on this map. So in the course of our people signing these treaties and the different locations they were, we guaranteed certain rights to ourselves. We reserved our rights. And one of the treaties that was important to us that has to do with Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton area is the Virginia City Treaty. This is actually artwork by my older brother, Derek Nelson Brown, that was commissioned for a film, and it's depicting the Virginia City Treaty that was signed in September 1868. This treaty, unfortunately, was not ratified by the United States government, but to our people, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, all of the lands that were mentioned in the treaty are still ours. And in that treaty, this outlines in red our areas. And the bands were the mixed bands of Bannock, Shoshone, and sheep eaters. And our people, we call ourselves by the different food sources that we would go after. And so in this area, it's the Apsáalooke, the salmon eaters, and the sheep eaters are Apsáalooke. And the sheep eaters, of course, we hear a lot about in Yellowstone National Park because those are our homelands there. Unfortunately, the United States government has not upheld the treaties, and then when trying to resolve the issues, cause even greater problems. Like this, for example, this is the map of judicially established lands according to the Indian Claims Commission. And you can see there's two big white areas that, according to the Claims Commission, were not established as Shoshone or Bannock areas. But according to our treaty, when you overlay the Virginia City Treaty boundaries and these areas, clearly they should have been established as Shoshone or Bannock areas. So besides the Virginia City Treaty, of course, the major important treaty to the Shoshone-Bannock people is the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868. And within that treaty, we reserved the rights to hunt and gather on the unoccupied lands of the United States. And for many, including our tribal membership and our Fish and Wildlife Department and others, those Article 4 treaty rights are their marching orders. The other pieces to that Article 4 hunting and gathering rights is so long as the game may be found thereon. So our Fish and Wildlife Department are very active in salmon restoration and other naturalist fish species. So besides that, we in our Language and Culture Preservation Department are very active in trying to restore the knowledge of our hunting and gathering practices. And through our Tribal Practices for Wellness Indian Country grant, over the past 4 years, we were very successful at doing that and getting our people out into the landscape, our ancestral territories, to hunt and gather. And to support that, we created some materials like this Shoshone seasonal round. I know this is very hard for you to see on such small screens, but what it depicts is the seasons and then the months. And then within each month, we have certain species that we might pursue. So this is just a limited way to convey our teachings, because there's so much more that goes into our hunting and gathering practices. Here in this image, this was adapted from a map in the Handbook of American Indians on the Great Basin. But what we did here is we added a lot more arrows, a lot more resources. We highlighted the fact that some of these reservations existed but are no longer there, like the Malheur Paiute Reservation and the Lemhi Reservation, which were both disbanded. But this is to give you an idea of the wide range that Shoshone and Bannock peoples traveled over. Here's a photograph of, in 2017, at our ceremonial buffalo hunt. The caption there, Damambuash, Sik Virenu. That means we're still here. And our ancestors, the ones who signed the treaties, they reserved a way for our people to be well, to be healthy. They reserved the ways in which we would like to be human beings and to be on the landscapes. So this photograph, exemplifies how we want to be. We want to eat our wasip, which means our natural foods, our wild foods. And here's our tribal member reciprocating what he's received, this animal, this bison, through prayer. Also, we want to be on the landscape to gather. And here we are in the Gray's Lake National Wildlife Refuge, gathering camas and sweet tobacco root. And again, we start with prayer. Here's a little bit more art of gathering camas. And here's a photograph of my wife and my little girl when we were gathering camas in the Camas Prairie Centennial Marsh. So in my position, Original Territories Historical Research, I am to support different educational interpretive projects like was mentioned, and the whole goal for our program is to have interpretation in all of our original territories. And I showed you the maps. It ranges far and wide. And so it's not enough just to have interpretive science for the general public to read, but through our grant, we brought our tribal members out to the different places to see the interpretive science and then carry out hunting or gathering or physical activities. So on the BLM, East Fork Salmon River, here's one of our tribal elders, Pharaoh Wildcat. He helped with the prayer, the blessing, and then sang for us when we dedicated the interpretive sign there. Here's some of our tribal members checking it out. And then here's our walk that we did. We did a 5-mile walk up near the wilderness area. Then of course, there are many federal agencies, and each of them have their own style of consulting with the tribes. With the Grand Teton National Park, we started with one interpretive project, and we're going to continue over the next few years to develop further projects. But this last summer, we were fortunate to finish a project for the Pacific Creek Landing, and we hosted this sign dedication, and then we had a float down the Snake River, which was amazing for our tribal membership to be out in the landscape and then get a chance to float the river. We've also worked with the City of Rocks National Monument, another NPS agency, and here's my brother and Tara, I forget her name, sorry, but there they are looking at the register rocks, and then my brother, he was commissioned to do the art for our panels. So here is an example of some of the work, and then the completed panel there at City of Rocks. So it's good that the federal agencies are now required to consult with us, but it takes more than that, because through consultation, us and the agencies come to an understanding, but then we need to deliver that message and our messages to the public, so that's where the interpretation comes in. So here we presented some tribal history that is not known, that you really can't find in any printed books unless you're looking at government records, things like that. So I'm very fortunate to be able to get the history of our people out there. And what this talks about is in 1859, when the government decided to build a wagon road through our territories, they first made agreements with our leaders so that they could have the right of way. So here's Wallace Keck giving the sign dedication. Some of our chairman, Devin Boyer, my brother, my grandfather sitting there in the foreground, checking out the signs, our people, checking out the other signs. And then this is one of the things that I really strive for our people is to create these learning moments for our youth and things that they can be proud of. What they're looking at is species that live in City of Rocks, and they have the accompanying Shoshone names for them, so that when they go out into the landscape, it's not all in English, but also reflects our own language and history and culture. So I'm out of time here, but I just wanted to cruise through these last few photos. We were at Hagerman Fossil Beds, some more artwork that was created for the interpretation, our tribal members speaking with the NPS, and then the final panel. So thank you. This is such a condensed time. There's so much more I could share with you. Hopefully you have some questions at the end. Thank you.
Really wonderful to be here. Wow, what a great place to be, and so thankful for all of you coming and supporting this effort. And you know, good things are coming, changes in the air, it feels like. And you know, just to kind of give you a little background on myself, I grew up on the Little Bighorn River, and my parents lived on the battlefield for 30 years. And I worked at the battlefield, gift shop and restaurant, washing dishes for quite a while. I actually got elevated to cook, but then they put me back down quickly in the dishwasher. So anyway, I've had, and I've seen, you know, the native presence and influence on the park become more substantial over the years. You know, when I was growing up, it was the Custer battlefield. You know, and years ago, they changed it to the Little Bighorn battlefield. It took an act of Congress. And then, you know, later on we see the tombstones for the native warriors who fought in the battle. And then, of course, the monument that was built, you know, it's been over 20 years now. And so I think just looking at that one example there, I think we can take a lot from that. One of the things I take from it is that, you know, as Native people, we do have opportunities. They present themselves, they come open, but a lot of times we're unable to seize them because we don't have the capacity, and you know, our offices and all of the employees, we don't have enough people on board to do all these different things that we need to do. There's so many different priorities and needs in Indian country, and so I feel like as we build capacity, we'll be able to do more of the stuff that Nolan's doing, and that was really impressive to see all of those things that Shoshone-Bannock are doing. And I think we're seeing that in Montana as well. Just got an email from John Axline, who is the director of the interpretive science for the state of Montana. And so Facebook, you know, good old Facebook, someone had posted a photo of interpretive sign on a highway in Montana that used the word hostile, referring to Native people. And someone tagged me on the post and then was critical of that term. And then John Axline chimed in and said, well, you know, I'm looking at changing those things. And so that kind of got a conversation going, and then he emailed me just the other day and asked me if I wanted to help rewrite some road signs. And so things like that happen, you know, they come up, it's hard to say when they'll happen. You know, obviously we like to continue to move forward in a steady progression. And actually, one of the things I'm involved with right now is helping to introduce some legislation to Congress that's being sponsored by the Wilderness Society and the National Congress of American Indians, and that is an American Indian Heritage Act that will help to increase Native presence and control over public lands. And so hopefully that bill is going to be introduced in June here by Senator Rahalva from New Mexico. So aside from just goodwill gestures from public officials and whatnot, you know, it'd also be nice to have some legislation that would help to firm some of this up, and so we'll see what happens with that. In the meantime, the stuff I'm doing with Yellowstone Park has been great. It's been really hopeful. And it's been amazing working with Cam and Christina. And I feel like we've made a lot of progress over the past year. I feel like anytime we talk about public lands, at least from my perspective, it's nice to take an intertribal approach. You know, not living on the reservation, because I live in Bozeman, I'm closer to the public lands, and not all of my energies and focus are happening on the reservation. I can kind of look elsewhere. And so this is part of the work that I've been able to do. This is going to be way too small for anyone to read out there. But this is a piece that I just wrote. It's going to be published in Mountain Outlaw this month. And it's called Making Meaning and Medicine in the Land of the Burning Ground. And so I looked at 10 different place names in the Yellowstone Park, Crow places that have place names with them. And then I was able to identify 5 themes that are associated with those place names. So the themes that I was able to identify are, the hunting, gathering, and trading role that the Yellowstone Park had in Native people's lives. Also the precious materials that could only be resourced at the park, like obsidian and white clay from the mud pots. I also identified the ceremonial use of the Yellowstone Park. There's a lot of places in the park, two that I mentioned here, where people fasted, spent days and nights without food and water, praying for dreams. Also origin stories. There are a lot of origin stories associated with heavenly bodies and star constellations that connect the people and geographic features at the Yellowstone Park. So a couple of them that I mentioned here are the digging stick, also known as the liberty cap, and also the dragon's mouth that the Crow people call the bull. And then the flora and the fauna. So, of course, the bison, the elk, the bighorn sheep, and then all the medicinal and food plants that can be found in the park at various times of the year. So, you can read up on that, and I think, the focus and the goal, the whole thrust of this article is to show that we have a very ancient and very complex relationship with the park. And as Nolan mentioned earlier, a lot of the stuff that I wrote about in here is not going to be found in any published materials. This took years of research for me to gather this. I've taken it from a lot of different spots. I was fortunate to be able to teach a class in the park. The materials were developed by Dr. Timothy McCleary, and he was very generous in sharing them with me. Just oral traditions and interviews that he'd done with Crow historians over decades. So I'm very thankful and happy that this is going to be out in the public now. And I'm going to continue. There's a lot more. Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But with the support of Cam and Christina and everyone at the park staff has been so helpful and gracious and generous with their time and supportive. And it's been a really great experience, I think, for all of us. And I really think that this is going to change the way people think about the park, and we'll just kind of see where this takes us from here. As far as the teepee village goes, this will be the first time with the teepee village. It was a concept I've always thought about doing in the park. How much time do I have?
We've got about 4 minutes left.
Okay. Concept that I always thought about doing in the park was having a teepee village there, but of course we'd want to have an intertribal village. And so the goal would be to have all 29 affiliated tribes with a lodge, or 28. Is it 29 or 27? 27, okay, yeah, I get them mixed up. And so right now we have ordered 12 lodges, and we'll have 12 representatives from the different tribes in the region, and they'll have their own lodges in the village, and it'll be a 3-day event where we visit with the public. These representatives have an opportunity to interact and share maybe materials or oral traditions, songs, what have you. And so, and we'll see how it goes. I think we're all hopeful, but we don't really know because we've never done this before. If it turns out that everything goes well, we'll try and do it again. This is being produced by Mountain Time Arts. Director Francesca Pine Rodriguez here today, and has really galvanized an intertribal group to make this all happen. So, I'm just really thankful to be able to be a part of all this, and looking forward to partnering with Nolan going forward. So, thank you, Charles.
Thanks for letting me be a part of this. I share Nolan's sentiments of this has been such an overwhelming group of speakers that have been here this week, so thank you for letting me be one of those. When I first started my work in the National Park Service, I started at what's now Grand Canyon National Park, and there was a ranger there named Phyllis Kachenkova. She was a Hopi ranger. And this will give you a little taste of her personality. She was an amazing woman and mentor. I was sitting at the front desk of the visitor center with her one day, and a visitor came up to her and said, "Where do I see a real Indian?" And she said, "That way." And gave them directions somewhere else, and when she was done, she turned and looked at me and she said, "Today, I'm an Asian." But Phyllis was an absolutely amazing interpreter. You would go to her geology program and she would talk about Indian tacos. And she had stories about growing up in the Hopi house and hiding behind statues and making people feel like they'd been just touched by somebody because she would reach behind the statue and tap them on the shoulder. But she was only around for another year or two. So as I was coming into the Park Service, I watched as 4 amazing rangers from different tribes associated with Grand Canyon went into retirement, and those voices left. And that left a really huge impression on me, and I made a commitment to do what I could with what I had from where I was within an agency of 20,000 people. And so at Grand Teton, I did some programs, mostly with youth, because that's my bailiwick. At Grand Canyon, I set up some programs. At Grand Teton, which I'm here to tell you more about today, we have a whole suite of different programs, and a big overarching piece is learning side by side with the youth that are part of these, in the hopes that we, as people operating these public lands, are making sure that managing public lands is about having all the voices at the table. So National Park Service Academy is a training program where they spend a week spring break at Grand Teton and explore the Park Service from all different facets. And then they have a field experience, a paid field experience during the summer. And you'll notice that quite a few of these programs are paid experiences, and I think that's a really important piece, that we're paying the youth for their time. And just a couple examples. So National Park Service Academy isn't strictly for Indigenous youth, but I think it's a really great opportunity and avenue for the youth that are interested to get into the Park Service and be that voice within the system, like Director Sams was talking about earlier. So Jared Wakini is here in one of the photos. He's Comanche and came to work with the park up in Coulter Bay. Caden Walksnice here is I'm having a space out moment of which tribe he's from, but he worked at Sand Creek Massacre after training at Grand Teton, and he was the first member of his tribe to work at Sand Creek Massacre. So it was a really monumental thing. And not pictured here, Cameron Bonson came through this program, and one of the really lovely things about having her come through the program was that as she came into her internship at Grand Teton National Park, she shared stories that her grandfather had been part of the dedication ceremony of the Indian Arts Museum at Coulter Bay. So she was able to carry on this legacy of being connected to the park. Tribal Youth Corps started in the Centennial, and this is a paid experience that high school youth come and work within the park, and it's been in a variety of different areas: trails, historic preservation, vegetation. And one of the big things that we've looked for, and again, we evolve a little bit each year that we do this, is how do we sort of get out of the way? Because we're a bunch of non-Indigenous park rangers running programs, right? And so some of that is connecting them with other programs that are operating in the park. We have an artist in residence program that's operated in the park for 43 years. And different members of different tribes will come and demonstrate their artwork, so it can be connecting them there. We instituted a family night, and the families can have a gas stipend if they need it, but come and celebrate with their kids the hard work that they've done. And it's really awesome to just hear the pride in being able to contribute to the family when they're part of this. And we continue to evolve this program. This year we're starting to partner with Ancestral Lands Corps, Conservation Corps, to operate this program. And some of you may know Gabe Red Thunder Spoon Hunter is going to help work with that, and he's developed some food-based curriculum that he wants to bring into the program. And so again, finding ways where we can get out of the way and make these meaningful experiences for youth and enable them to get out within the park. Indigenous grounds leaders actually evolved out of Tribal Youth Corps because it's a big ask to say, hey, come stay for a month in this place that you may never have been without your family, who you're definitely going to miss. And Jada Antelope, who's in the center there, came back and helped us run that week and talk about the experience with Tribal Youth Corps. And Indigenous grounds leaders, in short, is career exploration and learning a little bit about your own leadership style. And they get a glimpse of other opportunities that can come up in the park, whether that's National Park Service Academy, Tribal Youth Corps, things like that. And one of the things that really excites me about this is that it's adaptable. So last year when Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Youth Employment Program wanted to work with us, we were able to re-engineer it so that we could fit around the cultural specialists that they wanted their kids to work with and things like that. So that's a really key part to the Indigenous ground leaders. And again, that's a paid experience. We want them to know that as they grow as leaders, that's a valuable skill that they can contribute. And then the last piece is just kind of talking about schoolwork in general. So we've collaborated with Teton Science Schools and done some scholarships to get schools to Teton Science Schools for multi-day experiences. We've done some listening sessions with St. Stephen's, which were just starting as the pandemic started, and so we're revisiting those ideas so that we can talk more with schools and teachers about how we can support and amplify work that hopefully folks like Lynette are doing, so we can support you in that kind of work. So just regrouping into that. And then couple images of other demonstrators. Some of you know the Pretty Elf dancers have come and helped us do some work with National Park Service Academy. And then I'm going to kind of click ahead because I know we're running behind, but I don't want to miss the work that we did with Nolan was really special, because anytime that we're out and about in the park and that tribal voice and presence is really visible is incredibly powerful for the youth, even when it's not their tribe. And so having this beautiful new exhibit that Nolan and his team worked on is, I'm getting a little goosebumps thinking about it, is right there at the gateway to the river, which is an experience that we try to facilitate for a lot of youth, and seeing those words and that seasonality and that expression of homeland is so powerful. And that event was really powerful because as Chip came in the door, many of you were in the last session, Superintendent Chip Jenkins has been here for 18 months. One of the experiences in that first year was hearing from Nolan and some of the elders about their experiences in the park, which some may not be great. And what a powerful thing for the superintendent to hear that as soon as he walks in the door, so that he knows what we need to shout out and what we need to fix. And then one of the less visible pieces that we've been working on is behind the scenes. And we've been developing a training tool for our non-Indigenous interpreters. And the thing that I want to highlight on this training tool is the unlearning part. It's the primary piece that we've already revealed for the staff and are using with the staff. There are so few of us who have learned accurate history in the course of our schooling that's one of the biggest things that we need to start with our interpreters, is filling in the gaps of history that we talk about, telling the truth about the difficult history between the Park Service and the tribes. And so that's a tool that we've instituted with the help of, in 2019, we worked with Aldina Bear-Dowak, Michael Blackwolf, and Emerson Bullchief to do a training. And so there are a number of videos that we pulled from those trainings There's a number of things from like Wind River Education Project that are in there to help us better understand the true history of this landscape that we're working within. And to help us understand things like historical trauma, the cultural competency spectrum, so that before we're even talking and trying to highlight that Indigenous presence on the land, we're making sure that we understand what the history actually is. So I'm really proud of that work, and it's definitely a work in progress. So if you're interested in helping or giving input on that tool, would love your input. But I think that can be some of the most powerful work that we do, because the Park Service has such a place to help educate the public more broadly on the full history. So with that, I'll close and hand off to the next speaker.
So just going to introduce myself. Han Damanarumura, Dansik, Umabigyan, Zas, and Siki. It's good that you're here, my relatives and friends. Nanai, Lynette St. Clair, Nasosori, Das, and Yuran Bigyan. I'm Shoshone. My name is Lynette St. Clair, and I come from the Warren Valley. Just a little bit of information about myself before I get started, and that's just to let you know that I am the Indian Education Director at Fremont School District 21, which is Fort Washakie School. It's a position that I've held cumulatively for about 10 years. I've been in the education field as an education advocate for over 35 years. Just kind of started out as a secretary in the school that I work at, and saw a turnover of administrators and saw the lack of interest in really providing engaging, authentic instruction for students there in my school. So that kind of pushed me to join the ranks of the teachers in the classroom. So I became a teacher for Shoshone language. I'm a language instructor. And after that bid, I decided that the politics of the classroom was a little bit too much for me, and I wasn't pushing the needle further than it needed to be. So I stopped being a teacher, and I ran for school board and was elected to the school board because I felt that there needed to be change in policy. So after we did push that further, and I actually was teaching at Wyoming Indian School, Shoshone Language and College and Career Readiness. So as a board member, one of my initiatives was to develop a Shoshone language app for our school, for our students, and get them to really start applying the language, having a very meaningful language experience. And so after working with our elders in the community, that was something that we made happen. So we do have a Shoshone language app now that's available for people to download and learn and hear the language spoken. That being said, I've heard a couple of my elders, which I was so happy, and it just made my heart happy to have our panel of elders here earlier this afternoon. There's nothing more that you can say about having your elders in the same room and having them share their life experiences with you. And if it weren't for our elders and the elders that were here today, the language experience that I have would be lacking. I grew up in a home where my parents both were fluent speakers. My family are actually language speakers. And so I was very fortunate, but the students that we have now in this generation, they don't have that. And so I felt it was my responsibility to try and return that, to the students and help in any way that I could. So that's been my experience as an education advocate for language and for our community. My first experience as a student guide was actually working with the Yellowstone National Park several years ago, where we took a group of students to Yellowstone through a cultural exchange program. And that was probably one of the coolest things that we, our students ever got to experience. They were able to go out and, just understand that their presence in the Yellowstone ecosystem is actually something that is in our DNA. We are connected to the land, like a lot of people have been saying today. And so that memory was jogged by a lot of our students when we were there. They were like, wow, this is just like being back at home. Well, you are home, you know, they were home. And so to see that, you know, spark of interest and to see that light bulb go off in their little brains was very rewarding for me. To have them experience the language, you know, that's connected to the land, we call that Bondoifuin, which is the Yellowstone, or the geyser area, the Yellowstone geyser. And we call our Mother Earth Sobobia, our Mother Earth. So our Indigenous presence on the land, we do have, is marked by the memory that we have in our DNA. And I like how Shane mentioned earlier in his talk that, you know, we have an ancient and complex relationship with the park. You know, we do. And, you know, when I was growing up, I never got to experience, you know, what our, you know, our students now are able to experience through those cultural exchange programs, through those unique opportunities that are extended to us, you know, through consultation with our tribes, and having our youth be able to go back up and experience their own homelands, you know, be able to put their feet on the soil that our ancestors walked on. You know, those are valuable, engaging experiences, and that's why I do what I do, because I want to provide those opportunities for our students, for not only this generation, but for future generations. One story that I wanted to tell was, we did a cultural exchange with Hopa Mountain. We went up into Montana, but we also did like the northern part of the park. And I'm going to change the student's name, but I always call it the summer when rain found his voice. And we had a culture exchange program in a partnership with a couple of other schools that came, and we all met there. And we were having, one night we were the first night we got there, we had a circle, you know, where as Indian people, we all know that when we start something, we start, you know, in a circle. We have a blessing, we pray, we cedar. And we were there to offer our presence in the park and to ask for permission to be there in a good way. And the young man that we had taken, he had never been off the reservation. And so when we were going through Thermopolis, through Wind River Canyon, he was just in awe. He was just like, wow, this is really cool. And I'm sitting there going, really? Seriously, you've never been off the res. You've never been this far in the canyon. No, I haven't. I've never been out of Riverton. I've never gone any further than Riverton. And I was like, wow. We got further down to Matitsi, and he was just like, whoa, this is so cool. And I'm like, really? Matitsi? Okay. So I was like, all right, this guy is serious. He hasn't been off the res. But we get to, the Yellowstone area, and we actually went through the north part and gathered with other youth that evening, and we had some Lakota people that were there, their youth, and some Blackfeet people that were there with their youth, and then us. The other students got up and they were eloquent and beautiful in their language. They got up and they introduced themselves in their language. The Lakota people got up and they introduced themselves. And our kids got up and they were just like, they were embarrassed. Like they couldn't introduce themselves in their language. And I was like, heartbreaking for me. I wasn't the language teacher at the time, but it was really kind of spoke volumes to me. And so we worked on that, the next night so that they could at least present themselves in our language. But Rain, I'm going to call him Rain, he sat there. He was an introvert, never been off the res, wasn't one of those guys that's, out there in the forefront. He was very withdrawn. He had some trauma issues. And he sat there at the fire that night and watched all of the other students get up and introduce themselves. And he was inspired by them. But the thing that really inspired him was not only the other students that were getting up and they were talking their language. It was the surroundings. It was the return to the lands that we are, that are part of us. And he, the next night, got up and he introduced himself in our language. And then he started talking, and it was like, unleashed this power within him. He became like this eloquent public speaker, overnight, and it was amazing. But the thing that really spurred him to that was opportunity, unique opportunity, engaging environment, and just giving him that self-esteem that was already there within him. He just needed to reawaken it. And so after that, he found his voice. And that's why I say the summer when rain found his voice. Because he found his voice, but he also became went out and he learned his songs, he learned how to speak, and he's still out there today, and people call on him to come and do songs and sing at events for the community. So he did find his voice, and he found it there in Yellowstone. And so when we're talking about these engaging opportunities for our youth, and we're talking about consultation with tribes about bringing our youth to the park, those things are valuable. Those are valuable experiences, and our youth deserve to be there. They deserve to reclaim their space and do it in a good way. And I like that we're doing it in consultation, and we're not having people come at us and say, this is what we're going to do for you. Because the days of the white savior complex are over. We're here, Indigenous, Shoshone, Arapaho people, we can claim our own space. We have our own voices, and we can do that. With your help, of course, but in consultation with us. So I really appreciate that we're here in a good way, and we're occupying the same space, and we have the same goals in mind. And I just hope that we can continue to have our presence in the park through cultural connections, and be able to provide that voice of our people. And I have to say one thing that I think is really worth mentioning, and that is our youth and our people need to reclaim our spaces through telling our own stories. And we've done that at Fort Washakie School by developing a travel app where you can put it in your cup holder and you can hear the voice of people from the Wood River, give the tour from Diversion Dam on 287 all the way to the Poposia River in past Fort Washakie at Boulder Flats. That was a travel story app that was developed by our students, and we wrote our own narrative. We did our research and did our own research and developed that travel story app. So you're welcome to download that if you feel the need to take a tour through the res and do it from the perspective of our Indigenous youth. So with that, I'm going to thank you for being an attentive audience. I know you're tired, but I appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Good afternoon. Thanks to all my panelists. That was fantastic. We got to get this team up to Yellowstone and put our heads together and get something going. So, I really like the title of this panel. It's Increasing Indigenous Presence in Public Lands, and I feel like it's so spot on for the conversation we've been having around Yellowstone's 150th. And about a year and a half ago, when we started talking to tribes and our partners about what the 150th means particularly to Indigenous people, we wanted to be really thoughtful about that. And what we heard from a lot of you is that don't put us on a stage. We want a presence in the park, right? What Linda just talked about. We want to reclaim our space in the park, and so it's an effort we've been thinking a lot about and making some good starts this year. I know Cam talked about a lot of those things earlier today and at his opening remarks, but it's something we can't do alone. And I think Shay mentioned the Teepee Village, which we're really excited about. It'll be fantastic. If you're around in late August, swing by. But the Teepee Village is part of a larger effort, and he mentioned Francesca with Mountain Time Arts. They've been putting together a larger project of which the TV Village is a part, and that project is called Yellowstone Revealed. And Yellowstone Revealed is about revealing the presence of Native people in the park, not the return of Native people, but revealing that they've always been here. They've been here in the past, they're here in the present, and they'll be here in the future. And so I just appreciate you guys organizing this and all of the work that our partners are doing to help kind of reclaim that space and create that presence in the park. In addition to that, in addition to the TV Village, Patty Valdez is going to do a really amazing dancing buffalo rematriation in the park. Dean Nicolai is doing ethnographic tours. It's just going to be really fantastic. So come see us in the week of August 25th, 26th, 27th. Kim's also mentioned the Tribal Heritage Center, which is at Old Faithful. It opened last Friday. It's running through September, and we have 30 tribal artists that will be here in the park throughout the course of the summer, telling stories, doing presentations, demonstrating and selling work. It's a paid experience. We pay for their time and travel, and they can sell their work. And I think what's really neat about this and what's really exciting is we don't want these initiatives to be something that we're just doing in the 150th year and say, okay, check, we're done. What are we doing for the 175th, right? We want to build on these things, and the Tribal Heritage Center is really a pilot. It'll be really interesting to see how it goes this year, and it'll be really interesting to learn about the experience of the artists themselves and what it was like to tell their stories and interact with our visitors, and how we can create a space that allows them to do that safely and comfortably and more permanently in the future. There's this really nice quote on the wall when you walk in. It's from Ren Freeman, and she says, "The land created us and we belong to the land." And we've been having a lot of conversations about what does a future Tribal Heritage Center look like in Yellowstone National Park? Is it in the kind of log cabin building that's the previous Haynes photo shop, or is it something else that's really not about the building but about the stories? And so we'll need all of your help to help us think about how do we tell those stories? What's the right facility? Is it where we have it, or is it something that really demonstrates to the visitor when they come in what the connection is between the landscape that they're in, Old Faithful, the geysers, the bison, and the people who were here long before this was a park. And so Francesca and I were talking last night in advance of this panel about, and she asked the question, what does success look like in Yellowstone National Park for Indigenous presence in the park? What does it look like to you guys 3 to 5 years from now? And I was thinking about that last night, and I think it's when visitors come here, and when you all come here and feel at home. I think it's when visitors come into the park and can see and feel the presence of the Indigenous people that have been here for 12,000 years or more. And I think it's when tribal members come in and feel welcome. And Director Sams mentioned someone saying something as basic as welcome home. And I think that's something, that kind of feedback and these types of discussions are really critical for us to help think about how we can foster that in Yellowstone Park. It also comes down to names. When you look around Yellowstone National Park, what are the names of the attraction sites? What are the names of the peaks? Cam mentioned that we forwarded a request to change the name of Mount Doan, First Peoples Mountain. There are a lot more places that we can look at like that. It's about who you see in uniform when you come into the park. We're also working with NPCA and CSKT on an internship, also a pilot that we hope to grow in future years. And somebody else mentioned earlier today, how do we get people into the park that just aren't tribal liaisons, but are in all aspects of the park and all divisions of what we do? So, we've been rattling off all these partners' names, and I've been trying to point to all these people in the room, and the point is we can't do it by ourselves. It's through conversations like this. It's through the many, many efforts of all of the organizations and groups that you represent. So thanks for your patience with us as we try some things, as we work on some things. We'll count on you to let us know what's working and what's not. But I think what's really exciting, and we've been having a lot of these conversations this spring, and I was thinking about what feels different about this time. And maybe it's reuniting and having these conversations in person after COVID, but I think a lot of it is the paradigm's changing a little bit. And where the Park Service is going through a transformation, and I think we're creating space, or we're trying to do a better job of, instead of kind of holding on to all of the control of opening that space and letting go of that a little bit, and welcoming folks in with a supporting role. So I just appreciate all the people in this room who really made that happen. I feel like, Francesca should be up here giving this panel rather than I, but it's just been, it's been a really good year, and it's been because of all of you. It's the leadership of Cam and Chip and the director, people like Shane, who are really helping us build those relationships at all levels. So with that, I know we're a little behind, so I'll stop talking, but thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you in the park this summer.